Welcome back. Blake Cousins here, Third Phase of Moon. We've got a special presentation for you today. Our friend Pharaoh, he has a YouTube channel and he went to AlienCon a couple days ago and he got to meet basically the celebrities, the stars from Ancient Aliens, Giorgio Tsoukalos and David Childress. And we're going to be able to hear some insight in regards to some of the theories that is breaking news recently. Take a look at this.
I followed the news about 3 or 4 days ago. There was a news story that was released, and basically they discovered a gigantic mass of iron or metal at the south pole of the moon. And this is incredibly fascinating because Childress and I, for example, are of the opinion that perhaps that the moon is an artificial object. And yes, that sounds crazy. However, to this day, astronomers are struggling to figure out how the moon came into its position, because as we know, without the moon, life on Earth would not exist. So what if we could artificially, in a planet that could potentially host intelligent life, what if we could do this by placing a moon in orbit in order to facilitate life? So it's an incredible thought, and the fact that these stories are coming out now, it's insane.
There's some interesting information that recently came out in this presentation by AlienCon and the panel from Ancient Aliens. David Childress explains how NASA has changed their opinion on what the moon was in the 1970s as their opinion is what it is today. Listen up.
NASA early on said, right after the Apollo missions, that our moon was older than the Earth. And earlier geologists had speculated that our moon was somehow part of the Earth, that it had come off the Earth when the solar system was formed. But after the Apollo missions, they basically said, no, the moon is older than the Earth, and it wasn't even from our own solar system. I've heard other people say, oh, they don't say that anymore, but that is what they were saying in the 70s and 80s. And there was a couple of books written in the 70s. One was called Our Spaceship Moon, and I think that's what the Ancient Aliens episode was called too. And the whole concept here is that our moon is a spaceship. It was brought here from another solar system. It was put into a special orbit around our planet, and that possibly the moon is hollow. And when the command stages of the Apollo module or whatever landed on the moon, it reportedly rang like a bell. So here you have the moon, possibly hollow. There are craters on the moon and other hangars that they can't find bottoms for that seem to be entrances into the moon. And in theory, the astronauts who've been to the moon and whatnot, would have seen some of these things and even been instructed to look for them, I think.
Yeah, and when you go to the Temple of Hathor at Dendera in Egypt, you see this magnificent ceiling and you see this procession of the gods ascending the stairway into the moon. And it's very clear from this depiction that they are leaving the Earth, going to the moon in order to go someplace else. And that was, again, Sitchin's hypothesis as well, that the moon was ejected from Tiamat before this planet exploded, half of it becoming the asteroid belt. That they had foreknowledge of this, the destruction of their planet, and they ejected 11 satellites, one of which was our moon. All of the geometry of the Great Pyramid is tuned to the moon and to the circumference of the Earth. So whoever it was that built the pyramid had this direct awareness of our relationship with the moon. And again, especially the Egyptian stories make it very clear that the moon is a source of life, that in between lives we might even dwell in the moon, and they thought of the moon actually as a sort of a soul catcher, as a matter of fact.
There's a part in the presentation that really baffled me in regards to the confusion that scientists and astronomers still have to this day. How is the moon perfectly placed in its position to the rotation of the Earth? It's mind-boggling. Listen to what David Childress has to say here.
The interesting thing about the position of the moon in the sky and its orbit around the Earth is quite special. And the ancients were totally, in the 1960s, a book was written by a guy named Dawkins called Stonehenge Decoded. And what he decided was that Stonehenge was a computer that was predicting lunar eclipses, which is a 13-year pattern that they were watching at. And this is the thing about our moon. Our moon is in such an orbit around the Earth and this is what Max, I think, was referring to, that it turns in such a way, revolves in such a way that the dark side of the moon is always away from us. We cannot see the dark side of the moon from the Earth. But there's something even more amazing, and that is that the distance that our moon is from the planet Earth, when there is a solar eclipse really, and the disk of the moon transits the disk of the sun as we see it from Earth. And in a total eclipse, the moon then, as it transits the disk of the sun, it perfectly eclipses our sun. So in other words, if the moon was a little bit closer to the Earth, it would more than cover the sun. If it was a little bit farther from the Earth, it would less than cover the sun during an eclipse. But our moon is in such an orbit that it, not more, not less, but perfectly covers the disk of the sun during an eclipse. For our moon to be arbitrarily in that orbit is like a zillion to one. I mean, that right there, many astronomers would say, is proof that our moon is placed in a specific orbit, where it is today, and that it's ultimately a spaceship.
The fact that extraterrestrial life exists here on the planet has already been proven. Scientists and the president himself came out in the 1990s stating that a meteorite recovered from the red planet itself contained a microbe organism, a pre-existence to life from the red planet itself. Now science today is basically dismissing this evidence. Why? Listen to what Giorgio has to say right here.
We already have proof for extraterrestrial life on Earth, albeit it's microbial, and that's okay. But if you read normal newspapers, nobody talks about this. In fact, in 1996, President Clinton, in August of 96, came forward and they announced that they found this meteorite, ALH 84001. And on there, they determined, or they thought, that there are fossilized microbes. And because that part of the meteorite was enclosed, they were saying, okay, it is from elsewhere or from outside the Earth. And 3 or 4 years passed, and that evidence was thrown out the window. Because in 1996, Clinton came forward and he said, we have found evidence for extraterrestrial life, albeit microbial. And then, I mean, that was a huge news story 25 years ago. And then the story not only disappeared, but apparently Dr. Richard Hoover and the people who worked on this project basically were told, no, these are just, local, it's dirt from the local area on Earth, and the piece had been contaminated and things like that. And so Richard Hoover, to this day, with many other astrobiologists, say that the ALH 84001 meteorite does contain microbial life, and we have now living microbial life in that ice cave up in Canada, ETs. So now all we need to find is the ETs that look like us.
The idea of evolution, how did we come to be? The fruits, the vegetables that we eat, what designed them? Certain characteristics of plants have no traces of evolution. Why? Well, Giorgio gets into the speculation behind it. It's quite fascinating.
This, by the way, all ties into the whole idea of panspermia, that Earth has been seeded by microbes deliberately from outer space, by accident, panspermia, or directed panspermia, other intelligent life forms sending out probes into the universe, into the galaxy, and liken it to the idea you have some field and you throw out seeds of grass. Well, the seeds of grass will grow anywhere life can exist. So what if Earth was one of those places and one of these probes arrived here, and this is how it all began?
It's like they're shooting DNA genetic bombs at the Earth, to bombard us with genetic material. essentially. Yeah.
Yeah, they actually call these things, they're von Neumann probes, or astro chickens is the term that they use for them. They're loaded up with DNA, they're part electronic, part artificial intelligence that go around seeking habitable planets. If they find something that works, the probe might sit out there for a little bit, observe, then come down, and then it lays an egg. It drops off its DNA, and out pops a new civilization from that. I mean, nanotechnology and AI all combined together. What's curious about this is that this perfectly matches the ancient Egyptian creation mythology.
You and I talked about the fact that there are multiple things on Earth that have no evolution on Earth, like the banana tree. I think it is the corn and the potato. They do not have an origin or an evolutionary process where you can see, okay, so here we have a tiny, tiny potato, and then over time it grows into big potatoes. So there is no evolution in the potato, for example. So what does that mean? Or corn, maize. What does that mean? It means that perhaps all these things were given to us by extraterrestrials through either direct contact or direct panspermia.
Bananas are all over the world. Bananas are a grass. They're the tallest known grass. And grasses reproduce either by seeds or by tubers. And they have no seeds. So they're looking at bananas being genetically engineered over 10,000 years ago somewhere. They think that the origin of bananas is New Guinea and Northern Australia. But next time you eat a banana, I mean, just imagine you're eating a seedless fruit that was genetically engineered thousands of years ago to be a complete food. Bananas are one of the complete foods. So they're a mystery plant, like we were talking about.
Well, that's a little bit of a clip for you, and if you want to watch the rest of the video, go check out Pharaoh. The link's below to the entire panel discussion. Now, I want to get your thoughts. What do you think of the ancient alien panel and their theories? It's quite wild, but you never know. Some of it could be right, and at least they're asking the big questions, and that's what I like. And if anybody out there has captured anything amazing in the skies, I want to see your video. My email's in the description below. Upload that video to YouTube and copy paste your link to the email, and I'll get back to you and tell you what I think of your UFO sightings. Everybody, keep your eyes on the skies. Things are going down, and make sure you hit that subscription button and the notification bell to be notified when we break the news down. We'll see you again next time.
Clearly, if your eyes are open, it's three construction styles. You have the earliest, which is at the bottom of the structures, giant megalithic, oftentimes polygonal walls. Then you have, on the second level, a smaller, but also a little bit megalithic, but sometimes completely smaller. And then there's the third level, where the blocks are as big as this piece of paper here. So little bricks, basically. Meaning that this is the latest construction style, meaning it doesn't go back to the very beginning. But why would anyone begin with the biggest of megalithic blocks? Because especially when you have polygonal blocks, and they're all interlocking with each other, and especially in the case of Peru, in Cusco, you can't even put a dollar bill in between the fittings. Now, in order to create something like this, it requires many things. Amongst other things, logistics, planning, and the transportation. So you can't just say, all right, well here, this block here fits there, and this block fits there, just throw it all together. No, these pieces have been cut in order to fit exactly where they belong. So there was high planning behind this. And according to our archaeologists, at the time when this apparently happened, there was no writing. So how, where, I mean,